She didn't scream when they shoved her down into the dirt. She didn't fight when they tied the sack over her head. She had already learned fighting only made the rope tighter. Anna Whitmore stood barefoot on a cold frontier road, bound at the wrist, sold like a broken piece of freight no one wanted to claim. And Ethan Calloway watched from the ridge above, jaw-locked hands frozen on his reins. He told himself to ride on. He didn't. Before we go further, if stories like this one move you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Anna's journey all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The morning Ethan Calloway rode into Dust Valley, he wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for fence wire. Maybe a sack of grain, if Holt's General Store hadn't already sold out. He had 12 miles of broken fence line on the north pasture, and a herd that was starting to test every gap like they knew it was there. He didn't have time for trouble. He didn't have patience for it either. He had been alone on that ranch for 3 years. Alone suited him fine. He came down off the ridge road at a slow walk, hat pulled low against the morning wind when he heard the men before he saw them. Laughter first, the kind that had nothing funny in it. Then the heavy drag of boots in dirt. Then something that wasn't quite a sound, more like the absence of one. A silence that didn't belong. He pulled his horse to a stop. Below the ridge on the wide flat of the valley road, 4 men stood in a loose circle. One of them was talking loud. The other 3 were watching something on the ground. No, not on the ground. Someone. Ethan sat still for 3 full seconds. He counted them. It was a habit he'd built during the war: count before you move. Count before you decide. 3 seconds of counting had saved his life more times than he could remember. Then he saw the sack. Burlap. Heavy, tied at the neck with cord. It covered her head completely, and she was kneeling in the dirt, wrists bound in front of her barefoot, on a road that was cold enough this morning to crack lips and numb fingers. The dress she wore was torn at the shoulder. Her hands, the only part of her he could see, were pale and still. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't making a sound. She was just still. The way a person gets still when they have run out of places to go inside themselves. "Step her up," the loudest man said. He was heavy-set, wearing a tan coat that had seen better decades, a watch chain looped from his vest pocket. He spoke the way men speak when they are accustomed to being obeyed. "Buyers coming through Millhaven this afternoon. We ain't got all morning." One of the other men grabbed her by the upper arm and hauled her upright. She didn't make a sound. Not one. Ethan's hand moved to the stock of his rifle, without him deciding to move it. His horse shifted underneath him, reading something in the way he'd gone rigid. "Easy," he said quietly. To the horse, or maybe to himself. He should ride on. That was the sensible thing. He had learned at considerable personal cost that getting involved in other people's business in frontier towns was a fast road to losing everything you'd managed to hold on to. He knew what men like that were. He knew what they were doing. And he knew that riding down there alone, unarmed beyond a rifle and a Colt, he hadn't fired in 7 months against 4 men who looked like they did this kind of work regularly. That was not a smart play. He sat there for 4 more seconds. Then he rode down. He came in slow. Not charging, that wasn't the right move. He came in at a walk, easy in the saddle, like a man who had just noticed something mildly interesting on the road and decided to stop and see about it. He kept his hands visible and his expression neutral. The heavy-set man saw him first and straightened. "Morning," Ethan said. "Morning." The man's eyes moved over him quickly, reading the rifle in the scabbard, the Colt on his hip, the set of his shoulders. "You need something, friend?" "Just passing through." Ethan let his horse stop about 10 feet out. He looked at the woman in the sack. Then he looked back at the man. "What's the situation here?" "Private business," the man said. "Move along." "I'd like to." Ethan kept his voice easy. "What's in the sack?" Silence. The 3 other men had shifted. Not dramatically, just a degree or two the way men shift when they're recalculating. "I said it's private business," the heavy-set man said, and his voice had dropped half a register. "I won't say it a 3rd time." "No," Ethan agreed. I don't reckon you will. He looked at the woman again. Her hands had moved slightly, not a gesture, just a tremor. She was cold. She was listening. Who does she belong to? Grant Harlan out of the Millhaven Rail Office. She's contracted freight. And that is the last answer I'm giving a man who's got no stake in this. Contracted freight, Ethan repeated. That's right. She's breathing. That ain't your concern. Ethan was quiet for a moment. The wind pushed through the valley grass. Somewhere behind him, a hawk called once and went silent. Take the sack off her head, he said. The heavy-set man stared at him. I beg your pardon. Take the sack off. Ethan's voice hadn't changed volume or pace, but something in it had shifted the way temperature shifts not suddenly, but unmistakably. Do it now. Mister, I don't know who you think you are. My name is Ethan Calloway. I ranch 12 miles north. I'm not a lawman and I'm not looking for a fight. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. But I am going to ask you one more time to take that sack off that woman's head, and after that, I'm going to stop asking. The man in the tan coat looked at the 3 men flanking him. Something passed between them, not words, just the calculation of numbers and risk. 4 to 1. But the one on the horse wasn't blinking. Fine, the man said, with the particular contempt of someone choosing to appear magnanimous. Show him. Show the rancher what he's so fired up about. One of the other men reached over and yanked the cord loose at her neck. The sack came off. Ethan had been prepared for a lot of things. He had not been prepared for her face. Not because it was remarkable in any extraordinary way, though it was, but because of what was on it. She wasn't crying. She wasn't dazed. Her eyes, dark brown, steady, sharp as a hawk, came up immediately and found his face with a directness that stopped something in his chest. She had been waiting. In the dark behind that burlap, she had been collecting herself, building something up behind her eyes, and the moment the sack came off, she was already looking at him like she was deciding whether he was worth trusting. In about 2 seconds. It took her about 2 seconds. Then she turned her head slightly away from him, like she'd made a decision and didn't want him to see what it was. She was young, mid-20s at most, dark hair tangled from the wind, a bruise along her jaw 3 or 4 days old from the color of it. Her lips were cracked and dry. The dress she wore had been decent once. There, the heavy-set man said. Happy. Ethan didn't answer him. Ma'am, he said, to her. Are you hurt? She looked back at him. The steadiness in her eyes hadn't wavered. I am not your concern, she said. Her voice was quiet and controlled, and it came out like something she'd said to herself 100 times already. I am not your concern. I am not worth the trouble. Don't stop for me. No, Ethan said, but I'm making you one. He looked at the man in the tan coat. Cut her loose. Now listen here. I won't say it twice. The man looked at him for a long moment, and something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, but assessment. The kind of calculation a man makes when he's deciding whether a situation is worth the cost. She's got a contract, he said. Grant Harlan's name is on it. You interfere with that contract, you're interfering with the railroad. I'm cutting her loose, Ethan said. You can write that down in whatever report you're filing. He swung down off his horse in one motion and walked forward. The 3 flanking men stiffened. His right hand hung loose and easy at his side 2 inches from the Colt. Nobody moved. He crouched in front of her and drew his belt knife. This is going to be all right, he said quietly. Not for them, just for her. She looked at the knife, then at his face. Then she held out her wrists. He cut the rope. The man in the tan coat let them go. Not because he was convinced, and not because he was afraid. Ethan suspected it was a colder calculation than either of those. 4 men beating 1 rancher on a public road in daylight left witnesses. Grant Harlan didn't like witnesses. The man in the tan coat would write a report, and the report would make its way to Harlan, and Harlan would decide what to do about Ethan Calloway at a time and place of his own choosing. That was fine. Ethan was used to people deciding things about him. He gave her his coat. She put it on without a word, and they walked the 12 miles back to his ranch, him leading the horse, her walking beside him. She didn't talk. He didn't push her. There was nothing that needed to be said in the first hour, and they both seemed to know it. It was 4 miles in when she spoke. "I don't need charity," she said. "I know. I'm not going to cry and tell you my story and fall apart on you. I wasn't expecting it." She glanced at him sideways. "Most men expect something." "I expect you to walk," he said. "That's all." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My name is Anna Whitmore." "Ethan Callaway." "I know, you said." Another pause. "You shouldn't have done that." "Done what?" "Come down off that ridge." Her voice was careful, measured. She was choosing every word with the precision of someone who had learned that words could be taken and used. "You don't know what you've put yourself in the middle of." "I've been in middles before. Not like this one." He looked at her. She was watching the road ahead, jaw set, and something about the way she held herself, not fragile, not broken, but careful, like a person carrying something heavy who'd learned exactly how to balance, told him she was right. Whatever this was, it wasn't simple. "Tell me," he said. "Not yet." She looked at him again, and the steadiness was back in her eyes, but there was something else in it now. Not warmth, not yet, but the earliest edge of something that might become trust if he was patient enough and honest enough to deserve it. "Maybe later." "Fair enough," he said. And they walked the rest of the way in silence. His ranch house was plain, 4 rooms clean, functional, the home of a man who had long since stopped trying to make a place feel like anything other than shelter. He'd built it himself 3 years ago when he came to Dust Valley with 2 horses, a trunk, and a very deliberate intention to be left alone. He showed her the spare room. Cot, wool blanket, a basin with clean water. "There's food on the stove," he said. "Eat what you want. I'll be in the barn." He was halfway to the door when she said, "Why?" He stopped. "Why any of it?" she said. "You don't know me. You could have ridden past. Most men would have." He stood with his back to her for a moment. "I've ridden past before," he said. Didn't sit right afterward. She didn't say anything. "Get some sleep, Miss Whitmore." He went to the barn. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the barn with his back against the stall door, hat in his lap, and thought about what the man in the tan coat had said. Grant Harlan. Millhaven Rail Office. He knew that name. Everybody in a 3-county radius knew that name. Harlan was the man behind the Millhaven to Copper Creek Rail Extension, the project that had been swallowing homesteads and frontier land claims for 2 years. Eminent domain when it could be done legally. Other means when it couldn't. Anna Whitmore had been in that sack. A woman, not freight, not property. A woman bound and hooded on a public road being moved like a shipment. Ethan pressed the back of his head against the barn wall and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the war, about the orders he had followed that he shouldn't have, about the ones he hadn't followed and what that had cost him. He had built this ranch on a specific promise to himself that he was done. Done with causes, done with crusades, done with the damage that happened when one man decided another man's situation was his to fix. But she'd held out her wrists, and he'd cut the rope. And now he was sitting in a barn at midnight trying to figure out what came next. "Don't make it more than it is," he told himself. "She's safe for tonight. That's enough." He almost believed it. She was awake before sunrise. He heard movement in the house and came in from the barn to find her standing at the kitchen window, fully dressed, watching the road that ran from the south. "They'll send someone," she said without turning around. "I know. Today, maybe tomorrow." She turned. In the morning light, without the shock of the road behind her, she looked different. Not softer, but more present. More herself. The bruise on her jaw was clearer, and so was the intelligence behind her eyes. When Harlan realizes Cutter didn't deliver me to Millhaven, he'll send men to backtrack. Cutter, Ethan said. That the one in the tan coat. Jed Cutter. He runs Harlan's transport arrangements. She said it the way you say the name of a disease factually without drama, because drama isn't useful. He won't be afraid of you. He'll come back with more men. How many does Harlan have? She looked at him steadily. Enough. Ethan poured coffee. He set a cup in front of her and leaned against the counter. You said last night you'd tell me later. This is later. She picked up the cup, looked at it, set it down. I worked for Harlan's land office, she said. Not directly, I was a ledger clerk for the Millhaven County Land Authority. My job was to verify deed transfers, cross-reference survey records, process filings. She paused. 6 weeks ago, I found something. What kind of something? The kind that shouldn't exist. Her voice stayed level, but something behind her eyes sharpened. Forged deed transfers. 43 of them processed through the Millhaven office over 18 months. Homestead's water rights grazing land, all of it retitled to a shell company called Crestline Holdings, which if you follow the ledger back far enough belongs to Grant Harlan. Ethan was quiet. Land fraud, she said, on a scale that covers 4 counties. Every family displaced to make way for the rail line was displaced legally, but the legality was manufactured. The documents were falsified, and I could prove it. And when Harlan found out you'd found it, he had me arrested. She said it flatly. Charged with theft of county records, fired, blacklisted, and when the judge, who happens to be a man Harlan has had in his pocket for 2 years, dismissed my evidence as fabricated, I was told to disappear or face worse. Her jaw tightened. I didn't disappear fast enough. So he decided to make you disappear himself. The kindest version of that word, yes. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. You kept copies. It wasn't a question. She looked at him. The evidence, he said. A woman who spent 6 years as a ledger clerk, who understood exactly what she'd found and exactly how dangerous it was, she kept copies. Something shifted in her face. Not quite surprise, but the nearest thing to it she'd shown. Like she hadn't expected him to reach that conclusion, and she was recalibrating him. Where are they? He asked. Somewhere Cutter can't find them. She picked up her coffee. That's all you need to know right now. That's fair, he said. She watched him over the rim of the cup. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Pity, or an angle? She set the cup down. Men who stop on roads don't usually do it for free. I cut the rope, he said. That's all. Whatever happens next is your decision. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that the silence became something else, not awkward, but weighted. The kind of silence that happens between two people who are both being very careful and both aware of it. There's a woman in Millhaven, she said finally. Her name is Clara Dowd. She's the postmistress. I sent copies of the documents to her 6 weeks ago before everything came apart. Clara's honest. She's one of 3 honest people left in that town. A pause. If I could get word to her, get those documents to someone in the state land office before Harlan's lawyers buried everything. How long would that take? Ethan asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. She looked at him steadily. It would require me to stay somewhere safe for that long, somewhere Harlan's men wouldn't immediately find me. You're asking to stay here. I'm asking, she said carefully, if staying here is possible. I'm not asking for anything I haven't. She stopped, started again. I won't be a burden. I can work. I know accounts, records, contracts. If you have any legal paperwork on this land, deed filings, grazing rights, anything Harlan might try to use. He's already looking at this land, Ethan said. She stopped. 12 miles north of the Valley Road, sitting on top of the best water source in the county. He kept his voice even. I've had 3 formal offers to sell in the last 18 months. I've turned them all down. And 6 months ago, someone started contesting my original deed claim. I've got a lawyer in Copper Creek working it, but it's slow going. She stared at him. Then quietly, Crestline Holdings. I don't know the buyer. The offers came through intermediaries. It would be Crestline Holdings. Something was moving fast behind her eyes. If Harlan is contesting your deed, it means he's already planning the route through this land. Which means... She stopped herself. I'm sorry. I'm doing the thing where I run numbers while I'm supposed to be the person asking for help. Keep running numbers, he said. That sounds useful. She looked at him. And something crossed her face that wasn't quite a smile, not yet, but was the first indication that one might be possible someday if the world gave her enough room. 2 weeks, she said. Maybe 3. And then I'm out of your way. You're not in my way, he said. He stood up and picked up his hat from the peg by the door. I need to check the north fence, he said. When I get back, I'll show you where the deed files are. If Harlan's been building a legal case against this land, you might be able to see it better than I can. He opened the door. Mr. Calloway, she said behind him. He paused. Why are you trusting me? Her voice was direct and quiet. You don't know if I'm telling the truth. You don't know if any of this is real. For all you know, I could be exactly what Cutter said, trouble. He looked back at her over his shoulder. You held out your wrists, he said. She frowned slightly. What? When I crouched down to cut the rope. You didn't flinch, you didn't hesitate. You held out your wrists like you'd been waiting for someone to show up and do exactly that, and now that they had you, weren't going to waste a single second. He put his hat on. A woman who's lying about who she is doesn't have that kind of steady. He went out into the morning. Behind him in the kitchen, Anna Whitmore stood with her coffee cup and looked at the closed door for a long time. Then she looked down at her wrists, at the red marks where the rope had been. And for the first time in 6 weeks, something inside her, something she had locked down and bolted and buried under every practical, careful, controlled thought she had left, cracked open just the faintest degree. Not enough to break, just enough to breathe. By midday, she had found 4 irregularities in his deed record. Not because she had been looking for drama, she'd been looking for exactly what she'd said she would look for. His original land claim was filed through the Copper Creek Territorial Office in the spring 3 years ago. Clean filing, properly witnessed survey attached. But someone had filed a competing survey through the Millhaven office 8 months later, using a subtly different set of boundary markers that placed the north waterline, the most valuable section of the property, 300 yards east of where it actually sat. She laid the documents out on his kitchen table with the precision of a woman who had spent years knowing exactly where to look. When he came in from the fence line and saw what she'd done, he stood in the doorway for a moment. That back survey, she said, pointing. The one filed through Millhaven. See this witness signature? She tapped the line. James Aldrin. He's a notary. He's also been on Harlan's payroll for 2 years. His name is on 11 of the 43 fraudulent deed transfers I found in the county records. He doesn't just witness documents, he creates them. Ethan came to the table slowly. He looked at what she'd laid out. If you can get this to the right person in the state land office, she said, it doesn't just protect your deed. It's a 13th piece of evidence in a pattern that Harlan cannot explain away as coincidence. She looked up at him. You've been sitting on this without knowing what it meant. I hired a lawyer, he said. Your lawyer doesn't know about Aldrin. She held his gaze. I do. Something settled into the room between them. Not romantic. Nothing that simple. Something steadier than that. The particular gravity of 2 people who have realized simultaneously that they are more useful to each other than they had understood. I'll send a wire to Copper Creek, he said. To my lawyer, and I'll write to Clara Dowd in Millhaven, she said. Through the Red Veil Post, not the Millhaven one. Harlan controls the Millhaven postmaster. She was already pulling the document back toward her, noting something in the margin. We need to move quickly. If Cutter reports back to Harlan by tonight, they'll know you're involved within 48 hours. And then, he asked. She looked up. And then, she said quietly, Grant Harlan is going to come to this ranch and try to finish what he started. She paused. And we're going to have to be ready. Ethan looked at her, at the documents spread across his table, at the steadiness in her hands and the calculation behind her eyes and the bruise on her jaw that was already turning from purple to yellow. He thought about the fence line he hadn't finished. He thought about 3 years of deliberate solitude. He thought about the sack. "Then we'd better get to work," he said. And they did. The wire to Copper Creek went out that same afternoon. Ethan rode into Red Vale himself, a town small enough that nobody asked questions far enough from Millhaven that Harlan's people didn't have eyes there yet. He sent 2 wires. One to his lawyer, a man named Gerald Fitch, with instructions to pull every document related to the competing survey and cross-reference the witness signatures. The second wire was shorter, sent to a name Anna had given him, a retired territorial judge in the state capital named Horace Bain, a man she said had spent 30 years watching land fraud eat the frontier alive and had never quite stopped being angry about it. She had written the second message herself, standing at the Red Vale telegraph counter, and Ethan had read it over her shoulder. Judge Bain, evidence of systematic deed fraud across 4 counties. Millhaven Land Authority, 43 transfers, 1 surviving witness. Documents secured. Request urgent contact. A. Whitmore. "He'll remember your name?" Ethan asked. "He testified at my father's deed hearing 12 years ago," she said. "He ruled in our favor." She folded the paper and slid it across the counter to the operator. "He'll remember." They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, and she didn't say another word the whole way. Not because there was nothing to say, Ethan could tell there was plenty, but because she was doing what she'd been doing since the moment he cut the rope. Running, calculating, building something in her head that she wasn't ready to show anyone yet. He let her run. The trouble started the next morning. Not from Harlan's direction, not yet. It came from Ethan's neighbor to the east, a man named Percy Cole, who ran a modest cattle operation and had, in Ethan's experience, the backbone of a weather vane. Percy Cole pointed in whatever direction the wind was strongest, and the wind that morning was blowing straight from Millhaven. Percy came to the fence line where Ethan was working, leaned on the post, and didn't immediately say what he'd come to say. That alone told Ethan everything he needed to know about the nature of the visit. "Heard you had some trouble on the Valley Road yesterday," Percy said. "Word travels fast." "Dust Valley's a small county." Percy picked at the fence post. "Heard you pulled some woman away from Cutter's men." "I did." "She's still at your place." Ethan looked at him. "Why?" Percy had the decency to look uncomfortable, which Ethan supposed was something. "Look, Ethan, I'm not here to tell you your business, but there's talk. Cutter came through town last night and he was telling people loud in the saloon with an audience that you interfered with a lawful transport contract, that the woman you took is a thief, stole county records, forged documents herself, all of it." "That's not what happened." "I believe you." Percy said it quickly. Too quickly, which meant he wasn't sure he did. "But the thing is, Harlan's got friends in this county, a lot of them, and some of those friends are saying that a man who'd shelter a criminal even if he didn't know she was one is a man who maybe doesn't understand how things work out here." A pause. "And a man who doesn't understand how things work out here sometimes finds that his deed claims don't hold up as well as he thought." There it was. Ethan straightened up from the fence post. "Percy." "Yeah?" "Go home." Percy opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his boots. "I'm just saying what people are saying." "I heard what you said." Ethan picked up his tools. "Now I'm telling you to go home, and the next time someone sends you over here to deliver a message that's dressed up as friendly advice, you tell them to come themselves." Percy went home. Ethan stood at the fence line for a long moment after he left, watching the empty road, feeling the particular weight of a situation that was moving faster than he'd like. He'd been given a message, delivered politely with a layer of neighborly concern over the top of it. But a message nonetheless. Let her go, or pay for keeping her. He picked up his tools and walked back to the ranch. Anna was at the kitchen table when he came in. The deed documents spread around her, along with a ledger she'd apparently found in his desk drawer. his own accounts, which she was now cross-referencing against something she'd written in a neat column on a separate sheet. "You went through my desk," he said. "I found your accounts." She didn't look up. "You have a discrepancy in your water rights filing from 18 months ago. Someone added a notation in the margin that wasn't there when you originally filed. I can tell by the ink oxidation it's a different age, and that notation limits your draw rights to the secondary creek bed, not the main channel." He stared at her. "Which means," she continued, "that if Harlan's people ever challenged your water access, you'd lose. Not because you filed wrong, because someone altered your filing after the fact." Now she looked up. "This has been happening for 2 years and you didn't know it." "No," he said. "I didn't know it. Your lawyer in Copper Creek Fitch, he needs to see this today, not next week, today." She set down her pen. "They're already building the legal case against your land, Ethan. The competing survey was step 1. The altered water notation is step 2. By the time they're done, you won't lose this ranch in a fight. You'll lose it in a courtroom with a stack of documents that look completely legitimate, and there won't be a thing you can do about it." He sat down across from her. "Percy Cole came to the fence line this morning," he said. "Harlan's people are already talking in town, calling you a thief, saying I'm harboring a criminal." She absorbed that without changing her expression. "How long before they move past talk?" "I don't know. Day. Maybe 2. She nodded slowly. Not scared, he was starting to understand that fear for Anna Whitmore was not something that showed on the outside. It went somewhere else. Somewhere internal, where she'd apparently built a very sturdy room for it. What showed instead was calculation. Adjustment. The rapid, quiet reordering of a plan. "Then we need the response to Bain faster than I thought," she said. "And we need Fitch to file a formal challenge to the altered water notation before Harlan can get ahead of it." She pulled a sheet toward her and started writing. "I'm going to draft the brief for Fitch. Everything he needs, the evidence, the argument, the relevant territorial statutes. I can have it done by tonight. You know territorial water statutes." She looked at him with an expression that was not quite impatience, but was in the same neighborhood. "I spent 6 years in a county land office, Mr. Calloway. I didn't spend them making tea." He almost smiled. "Not quite, but almost." "Write the brief," he said. She wrote it in 4 hours. Ethan read it twice. He didn't understand all of it. The legal language was dense, the citations precise, but he understood enough to know it was good. More than good. It was the work of someone who had spent years not just processing documents, but understanding them, seeing the patterns behind them, knowing exactly where the cracks were and where the load-bearing walls stood. He sent it to Fitch on the evening wire out of Redvale, along with a note of his own. "File the challenge immediately. Do not wait for my confirmation. Act today." They ate dinner that night at opposite ends of the kitchen table, which was covered in papers, and didn't talk much. But the silence was different from the one on the road. That silence had been careful, 2 strangers measuring distance. This one was something else, the silence of 2 people working toward the same thing, who had run out of words for the moment, because the words weren't what was needed right now. She was washing the dishes when she said without turning around, "You should know something." "All right. When Harlan finds out about the wires to Bain and Fitch, and he will find out probably within 2 days, he's not going to send Cutter back." She paused. "Cutter is for quiet work. What comes next won't be quiet." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "How many men does he run?" "Directly 8 to 10. In the county." She turned. "More. Because it's not just men he employs, it's men he owns. The judge, the sheriff." She stopped. "The sheriff," Ethan said. "Dalton Reeves." She said the name carefully. "He's not evil. I want to be clear about that. I've met evil and I know what it looks like, and Reeves is not it. But he's in a position he can't see a way out of, and men in that position tend to do what's convenient rather than what's right." She dried her hands. "Don't count on the law." "I stopped counting on the law a while back." "Then count on me," she said. And it wasn't a dramatic statement. It wasn't delivered like one. It was flat and practical and completely serious. I know Harlan's operation better than anyone alive right now. I know which documents are fraudulent, where they're filed, who processed them, and who signed off on them. I know his finances, his shell companies, his lawyers. I spent 6 weeks in a county land office reading everything I wasn't supposed to read. She held his gaze. Use that. He looked at her for a long moment. I will, he said. The first real test came the following afternoon, and it didn't arrive from the direction either of them expected. It came from a woman named Ruth Calhoun, who drove her buckboard up to the ranch gate at 2:30 and sat there until Ethan came out to meet her. Ruth Calhoun was 60 years old, owned the dry goods store in Dust Valley proper, and had a reputation for speaking her mind that Ethan had always respected, even when her mind wasn't saying something he wanted to hear. She didn't get down from the buckboard. "I'll be direct with you, Ethan," she said. "I'd appreciate it. There are people in town who are saying the woman you brought back from the Valley Road is a dangerous woman, a fraud, a liar." Ruth's voice was even, but her eyes were sharp. "And there are people in town who are saying you've lost your head over her and can't see it." "What do you think?" he asked. "I think Grant Harlan has been swallowing this county piece by piece for 2 years, and every time he does it, the story is always the same." She fixed him with a look that was not unkind, but was absolutely direct. "The person standing in his way is always a liar, a thief, a troublemaker. Always got something wrong with them, always got a reason why decent people shouldn't stand behind them." A pause. "The Hendersons were drunkards. The Vargas family were squatters. The Doyle sisters were—" She stopped. "You see what I'm saying?" "I do." "Is she telling the truth?" "Yes." Ruth Calhoun looked at him for a long moment. "You sure?" "She found 4 problems in my own deed record in one afternoon," he said. "Problems that have been sitting there for 18 months and my own lawyer missed. Yes, I'm sure." Ruth was quiet. Then she reached into the buckboard and produced a wrapped bundle bread he thought from the shape of it and something else. "Give her this," she said, "and tell her that if she needs anything from my store, she's to send a list with you and I'll fill it without a word to anyone." He took the bundle. "There's more people in this town who are tired of being afraid than you might think," Ruth said. "The trouble is, they're afraid to say it out loud." She picked up her reins. "But they're watching, Ethan. They're watching to see what you do." She drove away. He stood at the gate for a moment, holding the bread and whatever else was wrapped in the cloth, watching her buckboard disappear down the road. And something shifted in him, something that had been sitting tight and wary since the morning Percy Cole came to the fence line. Not release, not relief, but something like the earliest, most cautious edge of possibility. He went back inside. Anna was at the table. She looked up when she saw the bundle. He set it down in front of her and told her where it came from. She looked at the bread for a moment. Then she looked up at him, and something crossed her face that she didn't quite manage to contain. In time, a brief, unguarded thing, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Not weakness. Something closer to the opposite. The look of a person who had been braced for so long against the possibility of kindness that the smallest evidence of it hit like a physical thing. "Ruth Calhoun," she said. "You know her. She testified at a county hearing 2 years ago, against one of Harlan's land grabs. She was the only one in town who showed up." A pause. "They broke her front window the next week. She fixed it herself and didn't say a word." Ethan sat down. "She said people are watching." "They always watch," Anna said. "The question is whether watching ever turns into something else." "It might," he said, "if we give them something to watch worth seeing." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means we stop waiting for Harlan to move first." He leaned forward. "You said you can prove the deed fraud, not just for my land for 43 transfers. You said you have copies of the documents at Clara Dowd's office." "Yes." "Then we need to get you to Millhaven." She stiffened just slightly. "That's where Harlan's people are thickest." "I know. but Clara Dowd's sitting on evidence that expires the moment Harlan figures out where it is. And Judge Bain can't act without the original documents copies sent to the state capitol aren't enough. You said that yourself. He held her gaze. We've been thinking about this as a defensive problem. It's not. It's an offensive one. The only way to stop Harlan from coming after this ranch after you, after every family whose deed he's stolen, is to put the evidence in the right hands before he realizes we're moving. The silence stretched. Then Anna said, "It's a 2-day ride to Millhaven." "I know. Through territory where Harlan has eyes." "I know that too." She looked down at the documents, then back up. "If we ride for Millhaven and Harlan's men find us before we reach Clara, then we deal with that when it happens." "That's not a plan, Ethan." "No," he agreed. "It's a decision. There's a difference." He watched her. "What would you do if I wasn't here? If this was just you alone with the evidence at Clara's office and Bain waiting in the Capitol?" She didn't answer right away. "You'd go," he said. "You'd go because it's the only move that ends this, and you know it." Her jaw tightened. "I'd go because I'd have no choice." "You've got a choice now," he said. "Me. Which means you've got a better chance than you had before." He stood up. "I'm not telling you to go. I'm asking if you think it's the right move." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "We'd need to leave before dawn." "I figured. And we need a route that doesn't go through Millhaven proper. Clara lives on the east edge of town near the old mill. We come in from the creek road, we can reach her without going through the center. All right? And if we see anyone we don't recognize between here and there, we stop and we reassess." She nodded slowly. Not comfortable, he didn't think Anna Whitmore had been comfortable in 6 weeks and wasn't planning to start, but decided. The way she did things. Not warm, not reckless, just decided. "Get some sleep," he said. "We leave at 4. They didn't make it to 4. At 2:30 in the morning, the dog, a scrappy cattle dog named Biscuit, who had no real value as a guard animal and every value as a nervous one, woke Ethan with frantic scratching at the barn door. He was up and dressed in under a minute, and he came out of the barn to find Anna already standing on the porch, rifle in hand, looking south. "Someone on the road," she said quietly. 2 horses, moving slow. He came up beside her. The moon was thin, but enough. 2 riders, maybe a 1/4 mile out, coming up the Callaway Road at a walk that was just a little too casual for 2 in the morning. "They're scouting," he said. "Yes." She didn't lower the rifle. "Harlan sent them to see what's here, whether we're still here, whether there are others." A pause. "Or they're going to try to take me tonight before we can move." "Can you shoot?" "I'm not going to miss at this range." That wasn't the question. She looked at him. "Yes, I can shoot." Flat, no performance in it. "My father taught me the same way he taught me to read thoroughly and without sentiment." The riders stopped about 200 yards out. They weren't coming closer. They were just sitting there, looking. Ethan said, "Go inside." "No." "Anna, if I go inside, they learn that I'm here and you're willing to hide me." She kept her eyes on the riders. "If I stand here, they learn that I'm here, and I'm standing." A beat. That's a different message. He looked at her, at the set of her jaw in the thin moonlight, at the way she held the rifle, not aggressive, not theatrical, just ready. He stepped up beside her. Let them both be seen. Bishop said. For a long moment, nobody moved. The 2 riders sat their horses in the dark, 200 yards down the road, and Ethan and Anna stood on the porch, and the night was so quiet he could hear the creek a 1/4 mile east. Then the riders turned their horses and rode back the way they'd come. Slowly, unhurried, the way men ride when they want you to know they chose to leave. Anna let out a slow breath through her nose. "They'll report back," she said. "And then Harlan decides. He'll move fast. He's a man who hates uncertainty." She lowered the rifle. "We can't wait until 4. "No," he agreed. "Get your things." They were saddled and moving inside 20 minutes. The night was cold and the creek road was dark, and Ethan kept them at a trot fast enough to make ground slow enough not to push the horses past their footing in the dark. Anna rode without complaint and without conversation. She'd taken the documents what she had wrapped tight in oilcloth in her saddlebag, and she rode with the same focused quiet she brought to everything. Her attention moving across the dark landscape with a steadiness that had stopped surprising him, but hadn't stopped impressing him. They were 6 miles out when she said without preamble, "There's something I didn't tell you." He waited. The 43 transfers. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. One of them is a family named Aldrich. Jonah and Margaret Aldrich, 2 kids homestead on the South Fork of the Copper Creek Basin. They were displaced 8 months ago, told their deed had been invalidated by a prior claim, which was a lie. The prior claim was filed by Aldrin on Harlan's behalf. She paused. Margaret Aldrich was my closest friend. She and Jonah and the children are living in a single room above a saloon in Copper Creek right now, all 4 of them, while Harlan runs cattle on land they built with their hands. He didn't say anything. "I want you to understand why I'm not stopping," she said. "Not because of what was done to me, because of what was done to them. Because Jonah Aldrich worked that land for 11 years, and his daughter learned to walk in the yard of that house, and Grant Harlan had it taken from them with a pen and a forged document and a bought judge, and there was nothing any of them could do." Her voice hadn't broken, it didn't break, but it had deepened into something that was more honest than anything she'd said in 2 days. "I'm not doing this for me, Ethan. I want to be clear about that." "I know," he said. "You couldn't have known. I just told you." "No," he said. "I knew before." He glanced at her in the dark. Women who are doing something for themselves are careful differently than women who are doing it for someone else. You're not careful. You're precise. A pause. "There's a difference." She was quiet for a long moment. "My father would have liked you," she said finally. It was the closest thing to personal she had offered him, and he treated it with the respect it deserved, which meant he didn't make anything of it. He just nodded once and kept his eyes on the road. They rode through the rest of the dark in silence, and the miles fell away beneath them, and somewhere ahead, the town of Millhaven was sleeping, without knowing what was coming toward it. 2 riders on a creek road in the dark, carrying everything that needed to be true about what Grant Harlan had done, moving toward the one woman who had been holding it safe. What they didn't know, couldn't know not yet, was that Clara Dowd had sent a letter 3 days ago. Not to Anna, to Grant Harlan. The letter had been intercepted, read, and answered, and the man waiting at Clara Dowd's house when they arrived was not Clara. The man sitting in Clara Dowd's kitchen chair had the particular stillness of someone who had been waiting a long time and had decided somewhere along the way to stop being impatient about it. He was not one of Harlan's hired men. Ethan knew Harlan's hired men by type, broad, deliberate, the kind of physical presence designed to communicate consequence before a word was spoken. This man was lean, somewhere past 50, wearing a sheriff's badge on a coat that had seen too many winters. He had a cup of coffee in front of him that had gone cold, and he was looking at Anna Whitmore with an expression that was not hostile and not friendly, and was doing a great deal of work to be neither. Sheriff Dalton Reeves. Anna had stopped in the doorway. Not from fear. Ethan had stopped expecting fear from her. From calculation. She was reading the room in the 3 seconds before anyone spoke, the way she read documents finding the irregularities. Clara Dowd was at the far end of the kitchen, standing against the wall, with her arms crossed, and her face doing something complicated. She was a small woman, 60s, with the posture of someone who had made a decision she wasn't entirely at peace with. "Anna," Clara said. The word came out with too much weight behind it. "Clara." Anna's voice was completely even. "You wrote to him." It wasn't a question. Clara flinched like it was. "I had to," Clara said. "They came to the post office, 3 of them. They told me—" She stopped. "I have a daughter in Millhaven, Anna. She has children. They told me what would happen if I—" "I know," Anna said. Quietly. No anger in it, which was somehow worse than anger would have been. "I know what they told you. Reeves stood up from the chair. He was taller than Ethan had expected, and he moved like a man who was accustomed to being the largest physical presence in a room and was no longer entirely comfortable with what that meant. He looked at Ethan first, then back at Anna. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I'm not here to take you anywhere." "Then why are you here, Sheriff?" He picked up his hat from the table, turned it in his hands once. A man buying himself 2 seconds. "Because Grant Harlan told me to come pick you up and bring you to the Millhaven jailhouse on the existing theft charge, and I needed to see for myself whether I was going to do that or not." The kitchen was completely silent. "And," Ethan said. Reeves looked at him. "And I've been sheriff of this county for 14 years, Mr. Calloway. I have put bad men in cells, and I have buried good ones, and I have made decisions in this office that I can defend to God or a jury, either one." He set the hat down. "Arresting this woman is not one of those decisions." Anna said nothing. She was watching him the way she watched everything measuring. "But I also can't protect you." Reeves continued, and something shifted in his voice. The professional distance dropped out of it just briefly, leaving something that sounded dangerously close to honesty. "Harlan's got a signed order from Judge Callister. It's got my name on it, and it's legal, not legitimately legal, but legally legal, which in this county is a distinction without a difference. If I don't execute that order, I lose the badge. And if I lose the badge, the next man Harlan puts in this office will be a man Harlan chose, and every family between here and Copper Creek will feel that within 6 months. So you came to warn us," Anna said. "I came to tell you that you have until tonight." He looked at her steadily. "After tonight, I don't have a choice." "Every man who ever did something he regrets said he didn't have a choice," she said. It wasn't cruel. It was just true, and she delivered it the way she delivered all true things without decoration. "You have a choice, Sheriff. You just don't like either of the options." Reeves held her gaze. Something moved through his face, not anger, not shame. Something quieter and more permanent than either. "No," he said. "I don't." Clara made a sound from her corner of the room. "The documents," she said. "Anna, I kept them. I want you to know that. I wrote to Harlan, but I kept the documents. They're where you sent them." Anna turned to look at her. Clara held her gaze with the effort of a woman who knew she had failed and was choosing not to flinch from it. "Where?" Anna asked. "The loose board behind the mail sorting rack, third from the left." Clara uncrossed her arms. "I wouldn't give them to him. Whatever else I did, I wouldn't give him those." Craig. The documents were there. Anna retrieved them herself, moving through the back of the post office with the focused efficiency of a woman on a clock. Ethan stood at the front window, and Reeves stood in the doorway between them, not blocking, not facilitating. Just present, in the particular uncomfortable way of a man watching a situation he had decided not to stop. The packet was thick, oilcloth tied with cord exactly as Anna had wrapped it 6 weeks ago. She opened it at the sorting table, hands moving quickly, checking the contents against something in her memory. "All of it," she said, quiet, relieved in the way that came out as steadiness rather than exhale. "All 43 transfers, the survey records, Aldrin's signatures, the Crestline Holdings Incorporation documents." She looked up. "It's here." "How do we get it to Bain?" Ethan asked. "Not through the Millhaven Post," she said immediately, glancing at Clara, who had followed them through and didn't protest the implication. "And not by Ryder Harlan's men will watch the roads out of town the moment they know we're here." "The rail office," Reeves said from the doorway. Both of them looked at him. "The Millhaven rail office sends a courier to the capital every Tuesday and Friday," he said. "Bonded courier contract with the territorial government. Harlan can't touch what goes in that pouch without breaking his own rail authority charter, which he won't do, because that charter is worth 10 times more to him than whatever's in any single packet." A pause. "Today's Friday." Anna stared at him. "You're helping us." "I'm stating a fact about courier schedules," he said. "That's all." "When does the courier leave?" 10 o'clock. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:15. "We need a cover letter," she said, turning back to the table. "Something addressed directly to Bain, establishing chain of custody, explaining the nature of the documents and the urgency. If it arrives without context, it's just a packet of papers from an unknown sender, and it could sit in his office for 2 weeks." She was already looking for paper. "Do you have—" "Second drawer," Clara said. She wrote for 20 minutes without stopping. Ethan read over her shoulder as the pages filled not legal language this time, but something more precise than plain language. Clear, sequential. A woman laying out a case brick by brick with the particular authority of someone who had lived inside the evidence long enough to know exactly where each piece connected to every other. When she finished, she folded the letter into the packet, retied the cord, and turned to Reeves. "You said until tonight," she said. "That's right. Is there a way out of Millhaven that Cutter doesn't have covered?" Reeves was quiet for a moment. "Depends on how many men he's moved in since last night." He looked at Ethan. "How'd you come in Creek Road, East Approach, East? Cutter knows that road." He thought for a moment. "There's a north route through the Aldrich Basin. Comes out above the valley, cuts back west toward Callaway Land. Longer. Rougher." "Aldrich Basin," Anna said, and something in her voice shifted just slightly. "Jonah Aldrich's land. What's left of it?" Reeves said it flat without apology, which meant he understood what it was. "Will Cutter have men on the north route?" "Not yet, but by noon." He paused. "Leave before 10, after the courier goes." Now, the courier took the packet at 5 minutes to 10 without asking questions. A bonded government courier had no interest in contents, only in weight and destination, and the correct territorial seal, which Anna had obtained from Clara's official post office supply, with Clara's silent guilty cooperation. The seal went on. The packet went in the pouch. The pouch went on the courier's horse, and at 10 o'clock exactly, it rode north toward the capital. They watched it go from the side alley beside the post office. "It's done," Ethan said. "It's in motion," Anna corrected. "Done is when Bain has it in his hands and files for a territorial injunction." She looked at the road. "We need to move." They were saddled and heading for the north route by 10:15, and for the first time since they'd ridden out of the ranch at 3 in the morning, Ethan felt the specific shape of the situation shift. Not better, not worse, but different. They had moved the evidence. They had put it somewhere Harlan couldn't reach it. Whatever came next, that piece was done. What came next announced itself 40 minutes up the north route. 3 riders, coming toward them from the ridge above the Aldrich Basin, moving fast. Not the careful scout pace of the 2 men who'd come to the ranch road in the dark. This was deliberate daylight speed, coming straight at them. "Cutter?" Anna asked. Ethan looked. The lead rider was heavy-set tan coat. "Yes." She didn't hesitate. "Can we go around?" "Not on this terrain." He was already reading the ground. The basin road was hemmed on the left by a creek cut and on the right by a rock shelf, no room to ride wide, and the horses couldn't go faster uphill on this footing than Cutter's men could manage coming down. "Then we stop," she said. "Anna, we stop." She pulled her horse up and turned to face the oncoming riders. "Running tells him we're afraid. Afraid people are easier to manage. We stop. We let him come to us and we see what he does with a woman who isn't running." He looked at her. "He doesn't know about the courier," she said. "As far as Cutter knows, we rode to Millhaven to get the documents and we have them on us right now. That's what he's coming for." She held Ethan's gaze. "Let him believe it. You want to bluff him?" "I want him to make a mistake," she said. "Those aren't the same thing." He pulled his horse up beside hers, and they waited. Cutter slowed as he got within 50 yards. He'd brought 2 men with him, not the same pair from the valley road, bigger. He came in at a walk the last 30 feet, which was its own kind of statement, and stopped 10 feet out. He looked at Anna the way a man looks at something he considers property that has inconveniently rearranged itself. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Long way from home." "I don't have a home, Mr. Cutter. You saw to that." Something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Men like Cutter had filed guilt away somewhere inaccessible years ago. More like acknowledgement. She knew him. He knew she knew him. That was established. "Mr. Harlan wants you back in Mill Haven," he said. "Legal matter. You've got an outstanding theft charge." "Those documents belong to the county, not to Grant Harlan," she said. "I didn't steal them. I read them. There's a legal distinction." Judge Callister seems to disagree. "Judge Callister is on Harlan's payroll. I can document that too." She didn't flinch. "How many things do you want me to be able to document, Mr. Cutter, because I'm running out of paper, but I haven't run out of evidence?" Cutter's jaw tightened. He looked at Ethan. "You're making a serious mistake, Calloway. This isn't your business." "You came to my fence line," Ethan said. "That made it my business." "Harlan will take your land. He's been trying. I'm still here." He kept his voice even. "What are you going to do right now, Cutter, in daylight on a county road with 3 witnesses and a woman who can name every fraudulent deed filing you've processed in 4 years? You going to drag her back to Mill Haven?" He let that sit. "Sheriff Reeves know you're up here." Something shifted in Cutter's calculation. A small shift, but visible. "The evidence," Cutter said, looking at Anna's saddlebag. "Hand it over and we settle this quietly." "There's nothing in that bag," Anna said. He looked at her. "Don't." "Check it," she said. Silence. "Go ahead," she said. "Ride up and check it. You'll find oilcloth and trail bread and a spare shirt." She held his gaze with the absolute calm of a woman who had already moved everything that mattered somewhere he couldn't reach. "The documents you're looking for are on their way to Judge Horace Bain at the State Territorial Office. Bonded government courier. Left Mill Haven 45 minutes ago." A pause. "Harlan can't touch that pouch. And you know it." The silence that followed was the particular kind that happens when a man realizes the ground has moved under him while he was looking somewhere else. Cutter stared at her. "You're lying," he said. But it came out uncertain, which meant he wasn't sure she was. "When have I ever lied to you?" she said. "You've known me for 6 years, Mr. Cutter. You know what I do. I find things, I document them, and I put them somewhere safe." She let that land. "It's done. You're too late." One of the men behind Cutter shifted. A horse moved. Someone's hand was making a decision. "Don't," Ethan said, quietly. He didn't reach for the Colt. He didn't have to. Something in the way he said it flat, unperformative, the voice of a man who had spent years in situations where the wrong move killed people, stopped the shifting. Cutter looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled his horse back. 1 step. 2. The particular retreat of a man deciding to lose this exchange rather than escalate to something that couldn't be undone in daylight. "This isn't finished," he said. "No." Anna agreed. "It isn't. But it will be." Cutter looked at her one more time, and in his face, Ethan saw something he hadn't expected. Not rage, not contempt, but something closer to the expression of a man who has just realized the person he was sent to manage was never manageable, had never been. And the 6 weeks he'd spent treating her as freight had been 6 weeks she'd spent preparing for exactly this moment. He turned his horse and rode back up the ridge without another word. His men followed. "Boy." They didn't speak for a mile. Then Anna said, "That won't hold." "No," Ethan agreed. "He'll go back to Harlan, and Harlan will send a wire to the capital, trying to intercept the courier. And when he finds out the courier's protected by the rail charter, he'll go to Callister for an emergency order to impound the evidence before Bain can act on it." She was running the sequence like a clock mechanism, turn by turn. "We have maybe 48 hours before the legal machinery catches up. What do we need? We need Bain to move faster than 48 hours. She looked at him. "Is there anyone between here and Copper Creek who can send a second wire to the capital? Not from Mill Haven? I don't trust the Mill Haven operator anymore." "Redvale," he said. "Tom Greer at the Redvale Telegraph. He's honest." "How far?" "Hour and a half from the ranch." "Then we go to the ranch first, pick up whatever we need, and go to Redvale." She paused. "I also need to think. Think about what—" She was quiet for a moment. About whether what I sent Bain is enough. She said it with the particular discomfort of someone admitting something they hadn't wanted to admit. The 43 transfers are clear. Aldrin's signatures are documented. But Harlan's lawyers are good, and the first thing they'll argue is that the documents themselves were obtained improperly, that I was a county employee who removed official records without authorization, which means they're tainted. She kept her eyes on the road. I need a second source, an independent witness to at least some of the fraud, someone whose testimony Harlan can't explain away as a disgruntled employee. Who? She was quiet for a long moment, so long that he thought she might not answer. There's a man named Aldrin, she said finally. He looked at her. He looked at James Aldrin, the notary, the one whose signature is on all 43 documents. She didn't look at him. He didn't know what he was signing, not at first. By the time he understood what the documents were being used for, he was deep enough in that Harlan had him. A pause. He came to see me 2 months before everything fell apart. Came to my house. Said he wanted to stop. Said he had records, his own notary log, which would show the actual sequence of the signings and prove the documents were backdated. Her voice was careful and controlled. I told him to bring me the log. He said he would. He never did. Where is he now? In Millhaven, still notarizing documents for Harlan as far as I know. She looked at Ethan. He's afraid. He has every reason to be afraid. But if we could reach him, if he believed that cooperating with Bain's investigation was his only way out, he'd have to trust that the territorial authority could protect him. Yes. Can they? I don't know, she said. But if we get a message to him, tell him the documents are already with Bain, that the case is already built, and he can either be a witness or a defendant. She stopped. It might be enough. Ethan thought about it. How do we reach him without Harlan knowing? Clara, she said, and then more quietly, Clara owes me that much. They reached the ranch at noon to find the front door open. Not broken open. The way a door stands when someone has walked through it recently and not bothered to close it behind them. Ethan was off his horse before it had fully stopped, and Anna was right behind him, and he came through the door with his hand on the Colt to find Sheriff Dalton Reeves sitting in his kitchen for the second time in 12 hours. This time, he didn't have coffee. He had a folded paper in front of him, and his face had done something since the last time Ethan had seen him, something permanent looking, like a man who has just crossed a line he'd been standing on the edge of for years. I rode hard, Reeves said. You move faster than I expected. What happened? Ethan said. Callister issued the emergency order at 11 this morning. Reeves looked at the paper. Impound and examination of all documents currently in the possession of Anna Whitmore. Effective immediately. Signed by the judge, countersigned by the Territorial Marshal's office in Millhaven. He paused. The Marshal in Millhaven is a man Harlan hired 2 years ago. The courier? Anna started. The courier's protected by the charter. He can't touch what's already in the pouch. Reeves looked at her. But Callister's order means that the moment those documents arrive in the capital, they'll be flagged. An impound order from a sitting judge creates a legal hold. Bain can't act on impounded evidence without a counter-challenge, and counter-challenges in territorial court take 6 to 8 weeks, Anna said. Her voice had gone very quiet. And in 6 to 8 weeks, Harlan restructures Crestline Holdings, disposes of the subsidiary documentation, and replaces anyone connected to the fraud. She looked at Ethan. The window closes. Yes, Reeves said. The three of them stood in the kitchen, and the weight of the situation settled into the room. What did you come to tell us, Sheriff? Ethan said. You didn't ride hard to bring us bad news. You could have done nothing and let the order stand. Reeves looked at him, then at Anna, and in his face finally, after a day and a half of careful professional distance, something resolved. Not dramatically, just the particular quiet of a man who has stopped calculating and made a decision. James Aldrin came to my office this morning, he said. an hour after Callister signed the order. He reached into his coat pocket and put a small, leather-bound book on the table. He left this. Anna crossed the room in 3 steps. She picked up the book and opened it. Her hands were not entirely steady, and that more than anything else that had happened in 2 days, told Ethan how much was riding on what was inside it. She read for 30 seconds. Then she looked up and her eyes were bright with something that wasn't tears, but was the same temperature. "It's the notary log," she said. "All of it. Every fraudulent signing dated sequenced with his own notations in the margin." She held it up. He documented what he did, in his own hand. A pause. He knew this day would come, and he documented what he did. "He wants immunity," Reeves said. "Full immunity in writing from the Territorial Attorney General. Not from Callister, from the AG directly. He won't testify without it." "Can Bain get that?" Ethan said. "Bain can request it," Anna said. She was already moving. "And with the notary log plus the 43 transfers, the AG has enough to act independently of whatever Callister's order says. An AG investigation supersedes a local judge's impound order." She looked at Reeves. "You know this." "I know it," Reeves said. "Then you know that the moment this log reaches the Capitol alongside my packet, Callister's order becomes irrelevant." She held his gaze. "Is that why you brought it here?" Reeves said nothing for a moment. Then, "Aldrin brought it to my office. I could have held it as evidence under the impound order. I could have sent it to Callister." He stood up. "Instead, I rode 12 miles to bring it to you." He picked up his hat. "Draw your own conclusions about what that means." He put his hat on. "Sheriff," Anna said. He stopped at the door. "Why?" she said. "You said you couldn't protect us. You said losing the badge meant losing the only decent check on what Harlan puts in this county. You've been careful about every single thing you've done since last night." She watched him. "So, why this? Why now?" Reeves stood with his back to them for a moment. Then he turned just enough. "Because Jonah Aldrich's daughter came into my office 3 weeks ago," he said. "She's 8 years old. She came in by herself, walked up to my desk, and asked me why the men who took her house got to keep it." He paused. "And I didn't have an answer." He looked at Anna. "I've been looking for one since." He went out. The door closed behind him. Anna stood holding the notary log, and the kitchen was very quiet, and Ethan watched her process what had just happened with the same focused internal machinery she applied to everything, except that this time the machinery was doing something different. Not calculating. Something closer to reckoning, with what people were capable of, with what it cost them, with what it meant that Reeves had walked into this room and put an 8-year-old girl's question on this table and called it an answer. "Redvale," Ethan said quietly. "We wire Bain, today. We tell him what we're sending, and we send it tonight." She looked at him. "And if Harlan moves on the ranch while we're gone? Then we deal with that when we get back. This is your home, Ethan." "I know what it is." He held her gaze. "And I know what it isn't worth. It isn't worth letting Jonah Aldrich's daughter grow up without an answer." Anna looked at him for a long moment, and in her face, beneath the precision and the calculation, and the steady watchfulness that she wore like a second skin, something shifted. Something that had been locked for 6 weeks, and before that for years. Something that had learned to survive by keeping itself perfectly, completely still. It moved. Not much. Not dramatically. Just enough to be visible to someone who had been watching closely enough to see it. She looked down at the notary log in her hands. "Then let's go," she said. And she walked to the door, and he followed her out into the afternoon. And behind them, the ranch sat quiet and exposed on the Dust Valley Ridge. And somewhere north, a bonded courier was riding hard toward a judge, who didn't yet know that what he was about to receive would change 4 counties and 1 man's life. And the answer a little girl had been waiting 3 weeks to hear. Grant Harlan was still in his Mill Haven office. He didn't yet know that the 2 people he'd been trying to erase had just found the one piece he'd never expected anyone to produce. He would know by morning. and by morning it would already be too late to stop what was coming. The wire to Bain went out of Redvale at 3:30 that afternoon. Anna wrote it herself, standing at Tom Greer's telegraph counter with the notary log open beside her, pulling the most critical entries, dates, document numbers, Aldrin's marginal notations, and compressing them into the precise language of a woman who understood that every word in a telegraph cost money, and every word to a territorial judge cost credibility if it wasn't exactly right. Ethan stood at the window and watched the street while she wrote. Tom Greer, to his credit, asked nothing. He was 60, half-deaf in one ear, and had been operating the Redvale Telegraph for 22 years. He had seen enough frontier business cross his counter to know when a situation required discretion and when it required questions, and this one did not require questions. He took Anna's message, counted the words, quoted the price, and sent it without a syllable of commentary. The confirmation ticker came back 11 minutes later. Message received. Acting immediately. Send Aldrin's terms by separate wire to AG office. Do not return to Millhaven. Bain. Anna read it twice. Then she folded the confirmation slip and put it in her coat pocket, and her hands were steady and her face was composed, and only someone who had been watching her for 3 days would have noticed that she'd been holding her breath for 11 minutes and had just let it out. He's moving, she said. Tonight, Ethan asked. Bain doesn't wait. That's why I sent it to him. She picked up the notary log. We need to send Aldrin's terms to the AG office separately. Bain said so. Do you have enough for a second wire? He put coins on the counter without counting them. She wrote the second message in 4 minutes. Shorter, clinical. James Aldrin, notary, Millhaven County. Full cooperation. Complete testimony. Independent corroboration of 43 fraudulent deed transfers. Terms full immunity, territorial protection, relocation assistance. Contact through Sheriff Dalton Reeves, Millhaven. She pushed it across to Greer. Urgent, she said. Greer sent it. They were back on the road to the ranch before 5 o'clock, and the afternoon was going gray at the edges, and Ethan could feel the day ending, with the specific weight of a day in which too many things had moved too fast, and none of them were finished yet. When does Harlan find out? He asked. About Bain tonight, probably. He has someone in the capital. He has someone everywhere. She kept her eyes on the road. About Aldrin. She paused. That depends on whether Aldrin told anyone he was going to Reeves's office. If he did, Harlan already knows. If he didn't, another pause. Aldrin is not a brave man. He is a frightened one who finally ran out of room to be frightened quietly. Those men move fast once they start moving, because the fear of stopping is bigger than the fear of going forward. So Harlan might already know. Yes. Which means tonight is when he decides what to do about it. Yes, she said again. Which means tonight is when he decides what to do about us. They reached the ranch as the last of the light went flat and gray, and the first thing Ethan noticed was that the front door was closed this time. The second thing he noticed was Biscuit, who should have been at the barn, sitting at the base of the porch steps, with every muscle in his small body pointed toward the south road, like a compass needle. Ethan said nothing. He dismounted slowly, handed Anna his reins, and walked to the porch. He stood there for a moment listening. Then he went inside. The kitchen was empty. The papers were as they'd left them. Anna's organized stacks, his deed files the careful architecture of their 2 days of work. Nothing moved. Nothing touched. He went to the window and looked south. Nothing on the road. Not yet. He came back outside. It's clear. Anna tied the horses and came up to the porch. She looked at Biscuit, who was still pointing south with everything he had. He smells something, she said. He always smells something, Ethan said. But tonight, I'm inclined to listen to him. He went to the barn and came back with his rifle and an extra box of shells, and Anna watched him without comment, and then went inside and came back with her own rifle, the one she'd had on the porch 2 nights ago, and they sat down on the porch steps together and waited. The dark came in slowly. The creek murmured east of them. Biscuit didn't move. Tell me something, Anna said. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching the South Road, the way she watched everything steadily without drama. Before all this, before the ranch, what did you do? He was quiet for a moment. Scout, Union Army, 4 years. And after. He thought about how to say it. There was a town in Missouri. Reconstruction work. I was attached to a federal unit enforcing land redistribution orders. We got an order to remove a family from a property that had been contested. The order came from a colonel who I later found out had a financial interest in the resolution. He paused. We removed the family. Mother, father, 3 children. Put them on the road with what they could carry. He looked at the dark. I followed the order. I told myself the paperwork was legitimate. I told myself it wasn't my job to question the colonel. Anna said nothing. I found out 6 months later the order was manufactured. The family lost their home to a fraud not much different from what Harlan's running. He turned the rifle in his hands once. I resigned the commission the next day, came out here, built something that was mine and nobody else's, and told myself I was done putting my name on things other people had arranged. And then you rode down off the ridge, she said. And then I rode down off the ridge. She looked at him. You didn't do it because of me, she said. You did it because of Missouri. Both can be true. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, she said. About the family in Missouri. So am I. He looked at her. Every day since. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had just exchanged something real and were letting it settle without pressing on it. Then Biscuit growled. Not loud, low and continuous the way he growled when something was coming that hadn't arrived yet. Ethan was on his feet before it finished rifle-up eyes on the South Road. 3 riders. Not moving fast, not the aggressive speed of men who'd made a decision, but the careful pace of men who hadn't decided yet whether they were going to have to. In the lead, Jed Cutter. Behind him, 2 men Ethan didn't recognize. Bigger than the ones from the Ridge Road that morning. The kind of men Harlan sent when he was done being subtle. They stopped 20 yards out. Calloway, Cutter said. Cutter. You've had a busy day. I have. Ethan kept the rifle loose, not aimed, but present. You're on my land. I'm on a public approach road. Cutter looked at Anna, who had come to stand at Ethan's left, her own rifle at the same easy non-angle. Something moved across his face when he saw her, not the assessment of the valley road, not the calculation of the basin road. Something older and less comfortable, like a man looking at a situation that had stopped being manageable and was trying to decide if he was willing to say so out loud. Mr. Harlan wants to resolve this tonight. What does resolution look like to Mr. Harlan? Anna asked. You come with me, peaceably. The notary log gets returned to the Millhaven County office, and Mr. Harlan agrees not to pursue the deed contest on Calloway's land. Ethan said nothing. He's offering you your land, Cutter said, looking at him. Clean, documented, no further challenge. All you have to do is... Step aside, Anna said. Cutter looked at her. That's what you're asking him to do. Step aside and let you take me. She kept her voice level. Tell me something, Mr. Cutter. In 14 months of running Harlan's transport arrangements, how many times has he honored an agreement made under these circumstances? Cutter's jaw tightened. Miss Whitmore, I'm not asking for an argument. I'm asking for a number. She held his gaze. Because I have the records. I have the Pearson agreement from March of last year where Harlan promised the Pearson family water rights in exchange for their cooperation on a deed transfer and 6 weeks later filed to have those rights revoked. I have the Carmichael settlement from August where he promised... Enough, Cutter said. How many, she said. Silence. The answer is 0, she said. 0 times. Not once. She shifted the rifle just slightly, not a threat, an adjustment. The notary log is already in the territorial courier system along with 43 fraudulent deed transfers and a direct communication to Judge Horace Bain. It left Millhaven this morning. Your employer cannot intercept it, cannot impound it under Callister's order, because it was sent before the order was signed, and cannot explain it away, because the man who signed those documents is currently negotiating immunity with the Territorial Attorney General. She paused. You rode out here to offer a trade that has no value, because there is nothing left to trade. Cutter stared at her. The two men behind him had gone very still. You're bluffing, Cutter said. But his voice had the same uncertain edge it had carried on the Basin Road that morning, and Ethan watched it and understood that Cutter was a man who had been wrong about Anna Whitmore from the first moment he'd put a sack over her head, and some part of him was beginning to understand the full scope of that error. Am I? She said. Cutter looked at Ethan. Calloway, man to man. This gets worse for you if you don't. The lady asked you a question, Ethan said. You didn't answer it. I'd start there before you make me another offer. One of the men behind Cutter moved, just a shift, a hand dropping toward a hip. Don't, Ethan said. The hand stopped. Cutter held the stalemate for a long 5 seconds. Then he pulled his horse back, the same retreat as the Basin Road, the same controlled withdrawal that was not surrender but was also not advance. Harlan will come himself, he said. I know, Anna said. You understand what that means. I understand exactly what that means. She didn't lower her rifle until they were 30 yards out. Good night, Mr. Cutter. They watched the three riders go until the dark swallowed them. Then Ethan exhaled. He'll come himself, he said. Yes. She finally lowered the rifle. Which means we have maybe 6 hours. They didn't sleep. Ethan sent a wire to Gerald Fitch in Copper Creek, short direct, telling him to be at the Dust Valley Courthouse at 8 o'clock the next morning with every document related to the deed contest and the water rights alteration. He sent a second message through Tom Greer's overnight relay to Reeves. Harlan moving tonight. Need your badge where people can see it tomorrow morning. Whether Reeves would show up was a question he couldn't answer. Anna spent the hours going through everything that remained in the deed files, pulling and organizing with the systematic focus of a woman who understood that what was coming was not a conversation and needed to be survived before it could be won. She didn't narrate what she was doing. She just did it, and periodically she'd say something specific. This survey annotation needs to be with the Aldrin log when it goes to Bain's office, or Fitch needs to see this water rights notation independently of everything else. Don't let him conflate the two issues, and Ethan would note it and move on. Around midnight, she stopped. She sat back in the chair and looked at the table and was quiet for a long moment. I keep thinking about the Aldrich Basin, she said. He looked at her. We rode through it this morning. Jonah's land. She didn't look at him. 11 years. He built every fence post himself. Margaret told me once that he used to ride the boundary line every Sunday morning before the rest of the family was awake just to look at it. Just because it was his. She paused. It won't go back to him even if we win. The law doesn't work that fast. It'll take months, maybe years, and in the meantime, Harlan's cattle are on that land, and Jonah and Margaret are above a saloon. It won't be permanent, Ethan said. No, but it also won't unhappen. She looked at her hands. 6 weeks ago, I thought if I could just get the documents to the right person, it would fix everything. Now I understand that it fixes the system. It doesn't fix the people the system already broke. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. It doesn't. That's the part they don't tell you about doing the right thing, she said. It stops the bleeding. It doesn't bring back the blood. He looked at her. You still think it's worth doing? It wasn't a question. She looked at him. Yes, without hesitation. Because if we don't stop it now, there are 50 more families behind the Aldriches. 100. Every homestead between here and the capital that Harlan hasn't gotten to yet. She picked up her pen. So yes, I think it's worth doing. He nodded. Get some sleep, she said. I'll watch until 3. You should sleep. I will, after 3. She looked at him with the same steady practicality she brought to everything. You're going to need to be sharper than me tomorrow. I do my best work at a table. You do yours somewhere else." He almost smiled. 3 o'clock, he said. 3 o'clock. He woke at 2:58 to biscuit barking. Not the low growl of something approaching. Full bark, the alarm of something already arrived. Ethan was up and armed in under a minute, and he came out of the bedroom to find Anna already at the window, rifle in hand, looking south with an expression that had moved past calculation into something more immediate. "How many?" he said. 6, maybe 7, hard to count in the dark. She stepped back from the window. "They're not stopping on the road this time." He went to the door. Outside in the dark, he could hear horses and the deliberate sound of men spreading out. Not the bunched approach of a conversation, but the tactical movement of people who had come to do something specific and were positioning to do it. "They're surrounding the house," he said. "Yes." He looked at her. "We can't hold this." "I know." She said it without panic. "We were never going to hold this. This was always going to end in the open." She held his gaze. "Remember what I told you about the difference between afraid and ready?" "Yes." "I'm ready." She said it like a statement of weather. Factual. Irrevocable. "We go out. Not running. Not hiding. We go out, and we stand in it." "Anna, they came here to erase me again." Her voice was quiet and absolutely certain. "I am not going to let them do it from inside a house with the curtains pulled." She moved to the door. "Come out beside me. Not behind me. Beside me." He looked at her for 1 second. Then he opened the door. Grant Harlan was not what Ethan had expected. He had built a picture in his mind, the kind of picture that comes from hearing a man's name attached to damage for long enough that the name starts to feel like a physical thing. He'd expected size authority, the bearing of a man who had spent years being obeyed. Harlan was medium height, well-dressed, with a face that was more accountant than outlaw. He stood in the center of his 7 men with the particular composure of someone who had been in these situations before and found them tedious rather than alarming. He was holding a document. He looked at Anna first, then at Ethan, then back at Anna with an expression that was not quite contempt and not quite curiosity, and was somehow more unsettling than either. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you've caused a considerable amount of inconvenience." "Good," she said. Something shifted in his face, just slightly. She had not behaved the way he'd expected her to behave, and he was recalibrating. Ethan watched him do it and understood immediately that Harlan was not a stupid man, which made him more dangerous, not less. "I have a court order," Harlan said. He held up the document. "Signed by Judge Callister, authorizing the seizure of stolen county property currently in your possession and your immediate remand to the Millhaven County Jail on outstanding theft charges." "The evidence has already been transmitted to Judge Horace Bain," Anna said. "Territorial court supersedes county court. That order is unenforceable." "The transmission is contested," Harlan said smoothly. "My lawyers filed a challenge this afternoon. Until the contest is resolved, the impound order stands." He took a step forward. "You've made a brave effort, Miss Whitmore. I want to acknowledge that. But the law is the law, and right now the law says you come with me." "The law you bought," she said. "The law that exists." He looked at Ethan. "Mr. Calloway, this doesn't have to involve you. Step back. Let me resolve my business with Miss Whitmore, and your deed contest disappears tomorrow morning. You have my word." "You heard what she said about your word?" Ethan said. Harlan's jaw tightened, not much but enough. "I'm trying to be reasonable." "No," Ethan said. "You're trying to be fast. You're trying to finish this tonight, because tomorrow morning Gerald Fitch is filing a formal challenge to your altered water notation at the Dust Valley Courthouse, and Judge Bain is acting on 43 fraudulent transfers, and James Aldrin is talking to the Territorial Attorney General." He kept his voice even. "You came here tonight because the morning is running out of things you can stop." The 7 men had gone very still. Harlan looked at Ethan with an expression that had finally dropped the veneer of reasonableness and was now something more honest and more cold. "You have no idea what you've put yourself in the middle of." "I've been told that before," Ethan said, "usually by men who were wrong about it." "Ethan." Anna's voice. Quiet. Not a warning, something else. He looked at her. She was looking past him to the road. He turned. Sheriff Dalton Reeves was riding up the approach at a walk. Not fast, not dramatic, just a man on a horse badge visible coming up a road at whatever pace he chose. Behind him, to Ethan's considerable surprise, were 3 other riders, and one of them was Ruth Calhoun, who had no business being on a horse at 3 in the morning, but was apparently making her own decisions about that. The other 2 were men Ethan recognized from town: Ed Marsh, who ran the farrier operation, and a younger man named Cole Briggs, who had a homestead claim 2 miles west of Ethan's fence line. They stopped behind Harlan's men. Reeves looked at Harlan. "Grant," he said. "Dalton." Harlan's voice had gone careful. "This is a legal matter." "I know what it is." Reeves dismounted. He moved through the space between the 2 groups with the unhurried authority of a man who had decided exactly how this night was going to go and was no longer interested in other people's opinions about it. He stopped beside Anna and Ethan, and he turned to face Harlan's men, and he stood there. And he was the law. Whatever the law meant in a county, Harlan had been buying piece by piece for 2 years. "You've got a court order," Reeves said to Harlan. "I've seen it. Judge Callister signed it this afternoon." He paused. "I've also got a wire from Judge Horace Bain at the Territorial Court, received 1 hour ago, ordering a stay of all county court proceedings related to the Whitmore matter pending territorial investigation." He reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. "Territorial Court supersedes County Court. You know that, Grant. Your lawyers know that. Which means that order you're holding is currently worth exactly the paper it's written on." Harlan stared at him. "When did Bain—" He stopped himself, recalibrated. "This is an overreach. It's a wire from a territorial judge," Reeves said. "Take it up with him." He looked at Harlan's 7 men. "Anybody here want to obstruct a territorial court stay order at 3 in the morning in front of witnesses?" He let that sit. "Raise your hand." Nobody raised anything. The silence stretched across the dark yard, and in it Ethan could hear the creak in the wind, and somewhere behind him Biscuit finally stopped barking. Ruth Calhoun spoke from horseback behind Harlan's men. "Grant Harlan," she said. Her voice was 60 years old and had no performance in it whatsoever. "I have known you for 12 years. I have watched you buy this county 1 acre at a time and 1 man at a time, and I have been ashamed of how long decent people, including me, let it happen because it was easier than stopping it." She paused. "It's stopping now. Tonight, and every person on this road is a witness to where you stand." Harlan turned to look at her. Something had changed in his face. The accountant's composure had cracked just slightly at the edges, not enough to show fear, but enough to show that he understood something had shifted that could not be unshifted. He looked at Cutter. Cutter looked back at him. And in Cutter's face was the expression of a man who has just finished his own calculation and does not like the result. 7 men against a territorial court stay order, and a sheriff and 4 witnesses in front of whom something irreversible had already been said. "This isn't finished," Harlan said. "No," Anna said. "It isn't." He looked at her. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked at her the way a man looks at something he was wrong about, not with respect, not with acknowledgement, but with the flat recognition that his model of the situation had been built around an assumption that was no longer operative. The assumption that she would break, that 6 weeks of erasure and a sack over her head and criminal charges and displacement would produce someone who could be managed. She was standing in her own space on the porch of a ranch house at 3 in the morning, having moved every piece that needed to be moved, and she was looking at him like he was a problem she had already solved and was waiting for him to understand it. He turned his horse. His men followed one by one, the particular retreat of people who had been present at a defeat they were going to spend some time deciding how to describe. Cutter was last. He looked at Anna once more, and in his face was something that was not quite an expression, something private. The internal reckoning of a man who had spent too many years doing Grant Harlan's transport arrangements and was beginning at 3 in the morning on a cold valley road to understand the full weight of that accounting. Then he rode after his employer and was gone. Reeves stood in the yard after they left. He looked tired, not the tiredness of the hour, but the tiredness of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just set it down and wasn't yet sure his arms remembered how to work without it. "The stay order is real," he said, answering the question nobody had asked yet. "Bain moved faster than I expected. He must have had the couriers and the original packet in hand before my wire even arrived. He's been watching Harlan for years," Anna said. "He just needed something he could act on. He's got it now." Reeves looked at her. "Aldrin confirmed this evening. The AG's office is granting immunity, full testimony next week." Anna nodded slowly. "What happens to Callister?" Ethan asked. "That's above my pay grade," Reeves said. "But I reckon a territorial investigation into 43 fraudulent deed transfers doesn't leave a lot of cover for a judge who signed off on all of them." He picked up his hat. "I'll be at the courthouse at 8. When Fitch files the challenge, I want to be standing there." He looked at Anna one more time. "You should know," he said, "that what you did the way you did it took something I'd stopped believing was possible." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. "Good night, Miss Whitmore." "Good night, Sheriff." He rode away. Ruth Calhoun had dismounted and was standing at the edge of the yard watching the road where Harlan's men had gone. Ed Marsh and Cole Briggs were quiet behind her. None of them made a move to leave immediately, and Ethan understood that this too was a choice to stay in the yard, visible presence standing in the space where something had just been decided. Ruth turned to Anna. "You should sleep," she said. "I know," Anna said. "You need anything from the store in the morning, you know where I am." "I know. Thank you, Ruth." Ruth nodded once. Then she looked at Ethan with an expression that contained approximately 30 years of frontier pragmatism. "You did right," she said. "Both of you." She got back on her horse. "Come on, boys. Let these people rest." They rode down the south road, and the night settled back around the ranch, and Ethan and Anna stood in the yard and listened to it. After a while, Ethan said, "You knew Bain would move fast enough." "I hoped," she said. "I didn't know." "Felt like knowing." She looked at him sideways. "Don't give me credit I didn't earn." A pause. "I calculated the probability. It wasn't certainty. It was a reasonable bet." She looked at the dark road. "A lot of things tonight were reasonable bets. They paid out." "Yes?" She was quiet for a moment. "Tonight they did." He looked at her. At the bruise on her jaw, finally yellowed to almost nothing. At the set of her shoulders, which had changed, not relaxed, not soft, but different. Less braced. Like a person who has been carrying something at full tension for so long that they've forgotten what it felt like without it, and are only now beginning to remember. "Get some sleep," he said. "In a minute." She didn't move. She was looking at the sky at the last of the stars before dawn started working at the eastern edge. "I keep waiting for it to feel finished," she said. "It doesn't." "It isn't finished," he said. "It's just past the worst of it." "Is that what this is?" "I think so." He looked at the same sky. "Morning's coming. That's enough for tonight." She was quiet for a long moment. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah, thank you." She said it the way she said everything, without decoration, without performance. Just the word with the full weight of what she meant by it behind it. Not for any one thing, for all of it. He nodded. They stood there a little longer in the last of the dark, before the dawn, and the creek moved east of them, and somewhere up the north road, a bonded courier was still riding toward a capital that was about to wake up and find 43 reasons to answer for what had been done to 4 counties, and one family's Sunday morning ritual, and one little girl's question that a sheriff hadn't known how to answer. Until now. The morning came in cold and fast, the way mornings do after nights that have taken everything out of you. Ethan was up before the light. He didn't sleep so much as lie still for 3 hours with his eyes closed, his mind moving through the same sequence, on a loop. Harlan's face when Reeves produced the stay order. Cutter's last look at Anna, the sound of 7 horses going back down the south road. He got up at 5, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sky turn from black to gray to the particular pale nothing of early dawn. Anna came out of the spare room at 5:30. Fully dressed hair pinned the same contained readiness she wore every morning like a second coat. She looked at the coffee, poured herself a cup, and sat down at the table where the deed files were still spread from the night before. She looked at them for a moment. Then she started organizing them. Stacking, sorting. Preparing the same systematic motion she'd been applying to everything for 4 days, except that this morning, there was something slightly different in the quality of her focus. Less emergency. Still precise, but precision for a purpose that was no longer survival. Something that looked from where Ethan stood a little bit like building. "Fitch will be at the courthouse at 8, he said. "I know." She didn't look up. "I've been thinking about what he needs to file first. The water rights challenge is most time-sensitive. If we get that on record before Harlan's lawyers arrive, it establishes our legal standing independently of the territorial investigation. Which means, even if there's a procedural delay on Bain's end." "Anna," she stopped. "Drink your coffee first," he said. She looked at him. Then she looked at the coffee cup. Then something shifted in her face, not softness, but the particular expression of a woman who has been running at full speed for so long that the suggestion of stopping even for 3 minutes lands like a foreign language she used to speak and had forgotten. She picked up the cup. Drank. "The Aldrich testimony," she said after a moment. "Bain will need Jonah's account of the original deed filing and the subsequent displacement notice. I can help him prepare that if he's willing. If I write the framework, he only has to confirm the sequence." "He'll be willing," Ethan said. "You don't have to carry that part alone." She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "I know," she said. And then more quietly, "I'm not entirely sure I know how to not carry it alone. It's been a while." He sat down across from her. "You've got time to learn." She was quiet for a moment. "Ethan, when this is done, when Bain has what he needs and the injunction is in place, and Fitch has filed every challenge, what happens to you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean to this." She gestured at the ranch, the papers, the kitchen window. "You came out here to be left alone. I arrived on your land 4 days ago, and I have turned everything you built in 3 years into this." She looked at him steadily. "I want to know if that's something you regret." He thought about it. Not a polite pause, actual thought, the kind he gave to things that deserved it. "No," he said. "I don't regret it." "Why not?" "Because a man who builds a fence around himself to keep the world out isn't living," he said. "He's just occupying space." He looked at her. "I was occupying space." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked back down at the papers, and the expression on her face was the same one she'd worn the night Ruth Calhoun brought the bread, that brief, unguarded thing there, and then composed again. But this time, it stayed slightly longer before it went. "We should get to this courthouse," she said. "We should," he agreed. Neither of them moved for another minute. Gerald Fitch was exactly what his wires had suggested. A compact, serious man in his 50s, with the focused energy of someone who had spent 30 years in territorial law and had stopped being surprised by human corruption, but had never stopped being angry about it. He was standing on the courthouse steps when they rode in a leather case under his arm, already talking to a younger associate who was taking notes. He saw Anna first. He stopped talking mid-sentence. "You're Whitmore," he said. "I am. I've been reading your brief since Ethan's wire came in 3 days ago." He shook her hand with the directness of a man who didn't bother with preamble. "It's good work. Better than good. I've seen territorial lawyers with 20 years of experience who couldn't structure an argument like that." "I had excellent source material," she said. "Harlan was thorough. Most fraudsters leave gaps. He didn't." She paused. That means his exposure is complete once the documentation is authenticated, which it will be. Fitch was already moving toward the courthouse door. Bain wired me directly at 6 this morning. The courier arrived at the Capitol at 11 last night. The man rode hard. Bain authenticated the documents personally at midnight and filed for a territorial injunction against all Crestline Holdings land transactions at 1 in the morning. He held the door. The injunction is already in place. Anna stopped walking. Ethan watched her absorb it. It didn't look like relief. Relief was too simple a word for whatever moved through her face in that moment. It was the expression of a person who has been braced against an outcome for so long that its arrival doesn't feel like arrival so much as the sudden absence of a weight they'd forgotten they were carrying. "It's done," she said. "The injunction is in place," Fitch corrected not unkindly. "The full legal process is going to take months. Harlan will fight it. He has resources, and he'll use every one of them. But the injunction means he cannot transfer, sell, or encumber any Crestline Holdings property during the investigation, which means every family whose land he took is protected from further loss while the case is built," Anna said. Yes. She nodded once. Something in her shoulders. Something she'd been holding since before the Valley Road, since before Cutter and the sack, and 6 weeks of running came down by a fraction of an inch. Not release. Just the first careful easing of a tension that had become structural. "File the water rights challenge," she said to Fitch. "And the deed survey contest. I want Ethan's land record clean before anything else." "Already drafted," Fitch said. "We file in?" He checked his watch. 22 minutes when the clerk's office opens. Sheriff Reeves was there when the clerk's office opened. He stood to one side, badge on, and said nothing while Fitch presented the filings. The clerk, a young man named Peters, who had clearly been briefed that this morning was going to be different from other mornings, processed each document with careful speed and stamped them without hesitation. Grant Harlan's lawyer arrived at 8:47. He was a man named Stoddard from a firm in the Capitol, and he walked into the clerk's office with the particular confidence of someone who had been woken at an inconvenient hour and had decided to make that someone else's problem. He stopped when he saw Fitch. He stopped again when he saw Anna. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you should know that my client intends to contest the territorial injunction," Anna said. "He's welcome to. He'll need to argue before Bain, which means the 43 fraudulent transfers are going to be entered into the record as context for the contest, which means," she paused, "they become public record regardless of how the contest resolves." She held his gaze. "Your client's name appears in connection with documented fraud in 43 separate land transactions. He can contest the injunction in open territorial court. I would encourage him to." Stoddard looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Fitch. Then at Reeves. Then he opened his case and looked at what was in it and made the quiet calculation of a man who understands that the ground he came to stand on has moved. "I'll need to consult with my client," he said. "Of course," Anna said. He left. Fitch watched him go. "He's not going to contest it," he said quietly. "Not publicly. Not with Aldrin's testimony in the record." "No," Anna agreed. "He isn't." Reeves from his corner said nothing. But something in his posture had shifted, the same change Ethan had noticed the night before, the particular straightening of a man who has set down something heavy and is discovering that he stands taller without it. The news moved through Dust Valley the way news moves through small places, not through any single channel, but through all of them at once. Each conversation adding detail and weight until by noon the basic shape of what had happened was understood by everyone who had ears, and most who didn't. Grant Harlan had left Millhaven before 8 o'clock that morning. Not quietly, 3 carriages, 6 men luggage. The particular departure of someone who has decided that a strategic withdrawal is more useful than a last stand. Cutter had gone with him. So had Aldrin's employer at the notary office, and 2 of the county commissioners, whose names appeared in Anna's documentation. Judge Callister had not left. He had instead sent a wire to the Territorial Bar Association at 7 in the morning, and the nature of that wire, which Reeves somehow knew about by midday, was widely interpreted as the legal equivalent of a man raising his hands before the shooting started. Clara Dowd came to the courthouse at 10:30. She stood outside it for a few minutes before she came in, which Ethan saw from the window, a small woman standing on the steps, gathering something. When she came through the door, she walked directly to Anna, and she stopped, and she said, "I know what I did. I know there's no." And then she stopped again, because she was crying, which she had clearly not intended to do. Anna looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Clara, it's all right." "It isn't. You kept the documents." Anna's voice was quiet. "When it mattered most, you kept them. Everything else—" She paused. "Everything else was fear. I understand fear." Clara pressed her lips together. Nodded. "What can I do?" she said. "Tell me what I can do." "There's a family named Aldrich," Anna said. "They're in Copper Creek above a saloon. A man named Jonah, his wife Margaret, 2 children." She held Clara's gaze. "They're going to need to know that this happened, that someone did something. Can you write to Margaret?" "Today," Clara said. "I'll write today." Sad. The twist that nobody had seen coming arrived at 2 in the afternoon, and it came from James Aldrin. Not indirectly, not through Reeves, or a wire, or a second-hand account. Aldrin himself walked into the Dust Valley Courthouse at 2 o'clock, carrying his notary log and a second ledger that nobody knew existed, and asked for Anna Whitmore by name. Ethan was there when he came in. Fitch was there. Reeves was there. Anna was at the table in the small meeting room where they'd been working since the morning filings, and she looked up when Reeves opened the door and said quietly, "There's a man here." Aldrin was smaller than Ethan had imagined, mid-50s thin, with the look of a man who had not slept well in a very long time. He came into the room and he looked at Anna, and he held out the second ledger with both hands, the particular gesture of someone making an offering rather than a presentation. "I should have brought this 6 weeks ago," he said. Anna took it. She opened it. She looked at the first 3 pages, and then she looked up. "What is this?" she said. "The payments," he said. "Every payment Harlan made to Callister, to the commissioners, to the marshal's office in Millhaven." His voice was not steady, but it was clear. A man who has decided to say a thing and is saying it regardless of what his body wants to do. "I kept a separate log from the beginning. I told myself it was insurance, that I'd never use it unless I had to." He looked at his hands. "I had to 6 weeks ago, and I didn't. He stopped. "I am telling you now." The room was very quiet. Anna looked at the ledger. She turned pages carefully, her eyes moving fast, the same motion Ethan had watched for 4 days, reading evidence the way most people breathe. Her expression didn't change, but something in it deepened, took on the weight of a woman looking at something that is exactly as significant as she'd hoped, and is still somehow more than she expected. "This is complete," she said. "Yes. Every transaction, dated, amounts, delivery methods. Yes." "Aldrin." She looked at him directly. "This isn't just corroboration of the deed fraud. This is a separate criminal case. Bribery. Corruption of public officials." She set the ledger on the table. "With this, it isn't just Crestline Holdings that comes apart. It's every judgment Callister made in the last 2 years. Every order, every ruling." She paused. "Including the conviction of anyone who was prosecuted through his court on Harlan's behalf." The weight of that settled into the room. Reeves from the doorway said very quietly, "How many cases?" Nobody answered immediately, because nobody knew, and all of them understood that finding out was going to take a long time, and was going to matter in ways that hadn't been fully counted yet. "Send this to Bain today," Fitch said. "Not by wire, this goes by bonded courier, same as the first packet, with a personal cover letter from me explaining the chain of custody." He was already on his feet. "This changes the scope of the investigation, significantly." "I know," Anna said. She looked at Aldrin. You understand what testifying means. Not just immunity, you're going to be a material witness in a territorial corruption case. That has a cost. Aldrin looked at her. I know, and you're willing. He was quiet for a moment. My name is on 43 documents, he said. I put it there. I told myself it was just paperwork. That I was just a notary. That what happened to those families... He stopped. I knew what happened to those families. I knew every time. He held her gaze. Yes, I'm willing. She nodded once. Fitch will handle your immunity agreement, she said. Stay close. Ned. By 4 o'clock, the second courier was on the road to the capital. Ethan and Anna rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, and this time the silence between them was different from every other silence they had shared in 4 days. Not careful, not calculating, not the working quiet of two people focused on the same problem. Something slower. Something that had room in it. They were 3 miles from the ranch when Anna said, Jonah Aldrich's land. Yeah, the injunction protects it from further transfer, she said. But the reversal, getting the deed restored to his name, that's going to require a separate filing, a quiet title action. It's going to take time. She was quiet for a moment. I want to help with that, specifically. Not as a general part of the investigation, I want to take that case personally and see it through. You know how to file a quiet title action. I know how to do most things in a county land office, she said. I spent 6 years there. A pause. I'm also going to need somewhere to work. The Millhaven Land Authority is going to be dismantled as part of the investigation. They'll need someone to manage the transition, authenticating existing filings, auditing the affected deeds, establishing what's legitimate versus what's fabricated. She looked at him. Bain's office is going to need help. You're going to work for the territorial court. If they'll have me. She said it practically without false modesty and without performance. I'm the only person alive who has read every document in that fraud from beginning to end. That's useful. I intend to make it useful. He looked at her. And where are you going to do all this? She looked forward at the road. I haven't entirely worked that out. You could work it out from here, he said, if you wanted. The road went quiet. The ranch came into view on the ridge above them, and Biscuit was already at the gate, and the late sun was doing something to the grass that made everything look briefly and completely like it was supposed to look. Anna was quiet for a long moment. Ethan, she said, I want to be honest with you. All right. I don't know how to be a person who stays somewhere. She said it with the same directness she brought to deed filings and legal arguments. I've been moving for 6 weeks, and before that I was surviving, and before that I was working, and I don't know what I look like when I'm not doing any of those things. She paused. I don't want to tell you I'll stay, and then not know how to. I'm not asking you to stay, he said. I'm asking you if you want to. She looked at him. There's a difference, he said. She held his gaze, and in her face the thing that had been moving slowly toward the surface for 4 days, through the ridge road and the kitchen table and the porch, and 3 in the morning in the dark yard, came the rest of the way up. Not a declaration, not a performance. Just the quiet, undefended expression of a woman who has stopped calculating for one moment whether the ground is safe to stand on. Yes, she said. I want to. He nodded. They rode the last mile to the ranch without talking, and the silence was the best kind, the kind that doesn't need filling, because what's in it is already enough. Yeah. 3 weeks later, Jonah Aldrich came to Dust Valley. He came alone, leaving Margaret and the children in Copper Creek until things were more settled, and he came because Anna had sent him a letter. Not a legal document, a letter. 2 pages handwritten, explaining what had happened and what was still happening, and what she believed was going to happen next. She had included a copy of the injunction documentation and a summary of Fitch's quiet title filing, which had been submitted 10 days earlier, and which Fitch believed had a strong chance of full restoration within 60 days. Jonah Aldrich was 43 years old and looked older. He came into the courthouse meeting room where Anna was working, and he stood in the doorway and looked at the woman who had done what she'd done, and he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "My daughter's been asking about you." Anna looked up from the table. "How old is she now?" "9 in March." He came in and sat down. "She asks a lot of questions about how it works, how the law works, why some people can take things from other people." He paused. "I didn't know how to answer her." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes people fight back," he said, "and that it matters." He looked at his hands. "Is that true? That it matters?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "Even when it takes this long. Even then." She held his gaze. "Your land is going to come back to you, Jonah. It's not going to unhappen what Harlan did the time you lost the year above that saloon. That's real, and it cost you something real, and nobody can give that back." She paused. "But your daughter is going to grow up on that land, in the house you built, and she's going to know that someone fought for it and that fighting for it meant something." Jonah looked at her for a long time. "My wife wants to have you to dinner," he said, "when this is done, when we're home." "I'd like that," Anna said. He nodded. Something settled in his face, not complete, not healed, but the first solid ground beneath a man who had been standing in water for a long time. The formal charges against Grant Harlan were filed by the Territorial Attorney General's office 6 weeks after the night on the ranch. 43 counts of deed fraud, 11 counts of bribery of public officials, 4 counts of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The charges named Harlan, 2 of his commissioners, the former Millhaven marshal and Judge Callister, who had attempted to negotiate a plea arrangement the week prior and been declined. Jed Cutter was not among the charged. He had reached Aldrin's immunity arrangement before Harlan's lawyers understood what was happening, and the information he provided detailed systematic from the operational side of everything. Anna had documented from the paper side, had filled the remaining gaps in the case with the thoroughness of a man who had decided that self-preservation required complete honesty. Anna heard the news in the courthouse meeting room, where she had been working for 6 weeks on behalf of Bain's transition team. Fitch brought it in person, which told her the nature of the news before he said a word. She read the charging document, all 4 pages. Then she put it face down on the table and looked at the window for a long moment. 43 families, she said. Yes, Fitch said. And Callister's caseload. How many contested convictions? 17 that we've identified so far, maybe more. He sat down. The AG's office is opening a review. It's going to take time. I know. She nodded slowly. It's going to take time, and it's going to be imperfect, and some people are going to fall through the gaps, regardless of how carefully it's done. She looked at him. And we're going to do it anyway. Every piece of it. Yes, Fitch said. Because the alternative is what Harlan was counting on, she said. That the mess was too big and the cost was too high and decent people would decide it wasn't worth the trouble. She picked up her pen. He was wrong about that. Fitch looked at her. He underestimated you. He underestimated all of us, she said. That was his mistake. Ethan was at the ranch when she rode back that afternoon. He was at the fence line. Always the fence line that North Pasture seemed to produce gaps faster than he could close them, and he saw her coming up the ridge road, and he set down his tools and waited. Something in the way she rode told him it was over. Not the riding itself, she always rode the same way, straight-backed, deliberate, no wasted motion, but something in the pace, the unhurried quality of a person who has finished something. She stopped beside him. It's filed, she said. All of it. All of it. He looked at her. How do you feel? She thought about it, genuinely thought, not the reflexive deflection of someone uncomfortable with the question, but actual consideration, the same precision she brought to everything. Like, I want to fix your fence, she said. He looked at her. I've been sitting at a table for 6 weeks, she said. Hand me a tool. He handed her the wire stretcher. She took it. looked at the gap in the fence, and went to work with the particular focused competence of a woman who had learned a long time ago that most problems responded better to action than to feeling. He worked beside her, and the afternoon moved around them, and the valley was quiet below, and somewhere north a family was getting a letter about a deed that was coming back to them, and somewhere in the capital a judge was reading a charging document that had 43 reasons in it for why the frontier was not a place where men like Harlan got to decide what was real. They worked the fence line for an hour without talking, and when the gap was closed, Anna stood back and looked at it with the same expression she wore when a legal argument came together. Not pride, but the quiet satisfaction of a thing done correctly. She handed the wire stretcher back. "I need to write to Margaret Aldrich tonight," she said. "Tell her about the charges. She should hear it from me." "All right," he said. "And I want to talk to Ruth tomorrow. About the families who were displaced, whether there's something the town can do in the short term before the restorations go through. Something practical. Ruth will have ideas. She always does." Anna looked at the fence, then at the valley below, then at him. "I've been thinking about what you said, about occupying space." She was quiet for a moment. "I did that too, for years before all of this. I moved through rooms doing work, and I told myself the work was enough, and I didn't look up to see who else was in the room." She paused. "I'm looking up now." He held her gaze. "What do you see?" She looked at him steadily, completely, with all the precision she brought to everything, and none of the armor she'd built to keep that precision from becoming something more. "Something worth staying for," she said. The valley held the last of the afternoon light. The fence was mended. The charging document was filed. 43 families were waiting for a future that was imperfect and slow and real. And Anna Whitmore was standing on a ridge in Dust Valley, with her hands at her sides, looking at a man who had ridden down off that ridge because he recognized erasure and could not ride past it. She was not erased. She had never been erasable. They had tried to take her name, her record, her freedom. Her face had covered it with burlap and sold what was underneath and called it freight. And she had come through 6 weeks of that with the evidence intact, and the argument built, and the case filed, and the land protected, and the truth in the hands of the one judge who was not afraid to use it. They had tried to make her disappear. Instead, she became the reason 43 families found their way back home.